So thanks everyone for being here today. I'm Lindsay Bradley. I am currently the VP of Administration with LeisureQuip Inc., a local company here in Reno, Nevada. And we're going to talk about elevating the candidate experience and your employer brand. So thank you so much for having me today. I want to kind of start off by talking about what we're going to dive into today, which is a human-centric approach and why it matters in the recruiting process. Current market conditions, they are tough out there for candidates and for employers trying to bring people on. I want to talk about how your job ad can actually elevate your candidate pool. How you create those job ads does matter, and it does change the type of candidates that you are going to get. Interview process. Somehow we've turned this into this firing range process, and I want to talk about a little bit more about how that can be a conversation and how to really draw out cultural fit, through a better interview process. Organizing and streamlining communication touch points. That's a huge, contention point of contention with candidates right now is not having enough communication during the process. Simple ways to increase your brand visibility. As well as utilizing feedback to improve the candidate experience. And that includes both from your recruiting and your hiring process itself to actually once you have them on board and their onboarding experience through their first 90 days. And I'll go into why that good onboarding plan matters. And then I do have some time for a question and answer, but do feel free to interrupt if you want to do the chat or you just want to unmute yourself and ask a question. Please do feel free to do so as we move through, okay? So what does human-centric mean? I'm here really to give a simple reminder that recruiting is not just a transactional function. There's connection, and it really is important that we're looking at it from a human perspective. In a world that's filled with so much technology, we have to really be intentional about how we perform our hiring process, and that's really important, that we're kind of shifting that paradigm to create a win-win for both the candidate and for the company. And so just kind of looking at really the core of human-centric, acknowledging our nature with calm, empathy, and nurturing thought, bringing awareness of one's movement and action upon other people. And it's really the focus on human beings. And I don't think it really gets more human than that when you're working with people and you have, an impact on where their career and where their livelihood is. So recruiting can be defined as the act of engaging and onboarding talent for work. I don't know about you, but I think those all sound like things that require human touch and interaction. So I believe if we design our processes of hiring through the lens of empathy, we build connection with people. And empathy is crucial in the design of a human-centered process. Empathy is what drives the connection, which creates a sense of acceptance, belonging, and value. And I'm not saying that all, recruiting processes are bad. I'm just saying, I think sometimes we need to stop and step back and ask ourselves, did we do the best we could to be more human today? And Kevin can certainly probably appreciate this one. I know he's a big Brene Brown fan, such as myself, and empathy is really, it's not connecting to an experience. It's connecting to the emotions that underpin an experience. And recruiting, the whole process, hiring process certainly puts a lot of emotions at play. And maybe you've never had a bad experience, with the hiring process. Maybe you've never been ghosted for a job, but how would you feel if you were? Would you feel sad? Would you feel angry, depressed, devalued? So, think about those times when maybe you've really wanted a job and you didn't get it and you didn't know why, because no one bothered to give you any feedback. Think about how that would make you feel. So as you're walking through your hiring process, think about those actions, that you could be doing differently to make someone feel better about this experience. Something that I want to really touch on is, creating that better experience no matter what the role is. I know at LeisureQuip, our process is the same for a frontline worker as it is for an executive. We're still utilizing all of the same questions and process and kind of that vetting to make sure that we are finding that culture fit no matter where you are in the company, because everyone's role has a purpose. And so I think it's just really something that I want to make sure that everyone is keeping top of mind as they're recruiting. Okay, so I said we're going to talk about current market challenges. Who doesn't realize that we have challenges in finding people right now? I mean, we've got extra unemployment benefits still out there. There's heavy competition. Remote opportunities are now, preferred, and temp work has become more appealing. And there's still some health and safety concerns, even though it feels like we're kind of moving past the COVID era and starting to make some progress. But I just want to keep in mind that we may not have control over these outside forces and challenges, but we can control our actions and how we choose to respond. So these challenges are the perfect reason to step up our game and really, once we get these candidates, let's be prepared to wow them. Let's show them that we can do this better. Got to get creative. We've got to work extra hard on approach, delivery, and branding to get people in the door, because we never know if there's another one behind them right now. So just some things to think about. We do have some control over how we decide to do things. Okay, so we're going to do a quick poll. If I can figure out how to do it, that'll be the thing. So let's see. Here we go. I'll give everyone just a couple seconds to kind of read through. So how do you think companies can improve the candidate experience and recruiting process? I'm sure everyone here has had the opportunity to apply for a job at some point. Just give it a couple more seconds. We've got a couple that haven't voted. Okay, well, in that poll. So pretty overwhelming response, all of the above, of course. But what's really interesting, look, more timely updates and communication and providing feedback. Those kind of the first couple things that we thought about. So did those results surprise anyone? So I'm going to share some of my super scientific survey results. I ran a couple different periods of time on LinkedIn. I ran some surveys. One of the questions I asked, what do companies need to do to improve the recruiting experience, which is the same poll that we just took. And giving feedback on rejection was the big one. People want feedback. They want to know. And then, by the way, the other that posted comments included pay range and more communication on what to expect during the hiring process. Okay. And then another, does the experience during any point of the recruiting process have an impact on your decision to pursue a position with a company? 96% said yes. And I know for a fact that has certainly changed my opinion on a company. Based on my experience, I'm going, wow, maybe they're not the company that I want to work for. If this is the treatment I'm getting right here out of the gate, what's going on the inside? And then last but not least, do you think all job ads should include a salary range to support compensation transparency? An overwhelming 88% said yes. So these are all things that we can take feedback from candidates to say, how do we make this a better experience? They seem little things, and I think they're all great ways to improve the process. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about job ads. So job ads should really be more than just a bulleted list of requirements. This is your chance to tell your story and establish your brand. So why does someone want to come work for you? And this is that first impression that I keep talking about. Get in there and tell them what you're all about, and sell yourself right then and there. So I want to go through a couple of job ads. Hopefully you guys can see these okay. I want you to kind of just take a minute, kind of read through, and we're going to kind of talk about what you think about this job ad number one. Okay, so what do you guys think? Are you getting the warm and fuzzies by reading this job ad?
No, I would say somebody needs to work on their editing function of the writing. I mean, like, horrible.
So this is a long list. Here's all these great things you're going to do, like nothing about the company. How do you, what's the culture? I don't see anything in here that's really appealing that would make me say, hey, yeah, sign me up for that. Okay, so I'm going to go to job ad number two. Take a minute here and let me know what you think of this one. So what do you guys think? This one getting better?
Yeah, it's definitely getting better.
So I'd say yes, definitely. I can definitely getting on the better side. It talks a little bit about the benefits and perks, makes an attempt to mention some growth opportunities, but that's only if you can get past the thread of the guidelines in the employee handbook in the very opening paragraph. So wow, okay, well that says a lot to me right there. And it's just kind of funny. This is only part of it. The major responsibilities would not fit because the list was so long. So again, this having so many responsibilities, these are things that you can build into your job description once they're in there. But, this can be very intimidating to potential candidates as they're going down this list, because if they're not going to meet one or two of those, they're probably not going to apply. So I think you're getting rid of a lot of, qualified people that have potential skill that you can train. Hire for attitude, you can train for skill. So don't be afraid to knock some of these bullet points out before you knock some candidates out of there. Okay, job ad number three. Take a few minutes to look through this and let me know what you think about this one. Okay, any feedback on job ad number three?
It's definitely much better. Obviously, it's geared towards why I would want to work there, and that makes it exciting, right? You get the sales pitch versus here's your bulleted list of your day-to-day versus, oh, this is really exciting, I want to be a part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, there's still going to be some requirements, still some, some qualities and skills that they're looking for to fill the job ad. But, it's talking about the culture. It's talking about, opportunities and growth and how you can contribute, to the team. And I think a really big key here, it shows the pay amount. So there's no surprises going in. So you're not wasting anybody's time, which I think is important. But just, telling the story about the brand, and again, keeping it realistic, but not just having such a long laundry list of requirements that it's overwhelming and thinking, oh, well, I'm never going to be able to meet all 52 of your bullet points. So why bother? So does anyone have any other tips that you like for your job ads and what seems to work best for you? If anyone, I know we've got a couple of HR professionals in the group. Anything you would add, or things that you like to do with your job ads?
Yeah, I'm not a HR professional, but my mom is the HR manager at Walker Mineral Lane, or Walker Lane Minerals, sorry.
Uh-huh.
And with this one in particularly, I feel like it's great. I really like how the opening statement, the important criteria is bolded. And I really just like how they worded the paragraphs after, and how they bolded, the topics for the paragraphs.
Awesome. Great. Great. Any other feedback or anything else anyone would like to share? Okay, awesome. Well, we'll just keep moving right along here. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about organization and communication. As you saw from both my super scientific poll and the poll everyone took, communication is really important to people. And we have phones, we have email, we have text, we have instant message, we have TikTok, for crying out loud. There is no excuse for not communicating with your candidates. The more organized you are, the less stressful it is to keep in communication. It doesn't have to be complicated. There are a lot of different ways to keep those candidates organized, and you'll feel less stressed. They'll feel less stressed. So it's just a matter of getting something into place that works for you. Okay, so depending on the size of your company, you may be using an applicant tracking system, an ATS, or if you're an HR department of one like me, we don't have anything that fancy just yet, and so I do everything manually in Excel, and it seems to work pretty well because I can customize it to fit my needs. So the big thing on tracking applicants, ATS, just kind of be aware of the bias that you could be getting from that, because when you're dumping all that information in and you're kind of telling it to create this algorithm and tell people like who are the good candidates, who should you be talking to, if you don't still put a little bit of that human touch on the process, it's not going to tell you about culture fit. It's not going to tell you about attitude. It's not going to tell you about potential. So yes, while ATS can be a great way to gather all that data and keep track of people, I would just really caution on putting, all your eggs in that basket of having your system, tell you who you should be interviewing. LinkedIn is great. I use LinkedIn, I use Indeed. I kind of use a blend of platforms depending on what type of roles that I'm trying to fill. LinkedIn, you can sort applicants by good fit, maybe, and not a fit. So it makes it really easy to kind of go through, know who you contacted. Indeed, kind of the same status, yes, maybe, no. They have a great feature where you can leave notes. So, if you want to do a phone screen on a candidate, it kind of keeps track for you. And then at the end, when you're ready, you can group all of your candidates together, to send them communication, send, everyone invites for, phone interviews, things like that. So I really love that you can leave notes. And what I talked about is kind of the Excel format or a whiteboard. If you have a big whiteboard in your office and you like that, it's kind of nice if you build out a grid and use a little magnets, you can kind of move people through the process and kind of have that visual. Sometimes that helps to have it right in front of you. But don't be afraid to create your own system. I like to compile all the qualified candidates from each of the platforms because I use multiple platforms to recruit. So you're actively engaged to ensure communication touch points are met. And so again, you can keep that candidate movement through the pipeline and be up to date on what you're using. So no matter what platform that you might be using for recruiting, there's a lot of different ways to still keep track of people. So here's an example, kind of some tips for organizing your applicants. I like to create an online folder to house all the info for that particular recruitment. Keep the job ad in there, the job description, your resumes, your applications, your phone screen questions, your in-person questions, your completed phone screens, and then what I call a candidate tracker log. I don't know if you, I guess, can see this. I know it's probably a little bit blurry. This is just something very simple. I just create this to keep track of everybody. name, phone, email, the date they applied, the source, because again, I'm getting people off of Indeed and LinkedIn sometimes when I set a phone screen date, if they're moving forward, when their video interview is, when their update, when I've promised them that they're going to hear from me by, and that's really important, is to setting that time and sticking to it. Following through is so huge. And I think if you just at least have some sort of mechanism to do the tracking, you're not going to miss those deadlines, and you're going to keep yourself sane and keep your candidate happy. Okay. So add columns, for your must-haves. If you want add your hiring managers to kind of keep track, you can make this pretty big. I left out quite a bit of what I would typically use just because it wouldn't fit on the screen. So are there any tips from anyone about how you like to organize your candidates? If anyone willing to share kind of any way that you like to take care of your candidates?
I like this, Lindsay. I like your column about the no thank you call made.
Yeah.
And to track that, because it truly is really discouraging. And one of the questions I'll have is, what can you say in that no thank you call, or that letter that you send out to a candidate that's within the bounds of the company's policies? What can you say or what you can't? So often the candidate wants feedback, but what is the recruiter able to provide or not?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And it's really about just being honest, when you're going through and you're talking to your hiring team, what did you talk about most? Where did they maybe lack some confidence in, or they weren't able to project to you, some of their experience, or give some depth to some questions. I think it's just a kind of a matter of coming to that understanding and just being honest, I think is the biggest takeaway there for the candidates. But just making that call and not leaving them hanging is so huge. It says a lot about the company. It says a lot about the recruiter. And I will tell you, you just never know who someone knows. And so, following through is going to be a really key point through the hiring process for anyone.
Okay.
Lindsay, I don't mean to interrupt your flow, but just on that point, something that I've experienced in the past was going through a series of interviews, 6 to 8 hours invested in interviews. Everything went really well, only to get a form letter rejection at the end. And while I understand that not every candidate is the best fit for every job, and there are going to be rejections, but after so much time investment, I would have at least expected a personal call saying I'm not a great fit for the position or whatever. So that really turned me off to that company, in the fact that I probably would never apply there again.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that happens, that happens a lot, and I just don't, I think we can do better than that, as hiring professionals, as HR professionals. I think it's a cop-out. When you're sending out a letter or an email, especially if you've actually talked to somebody on the phone. If I've had a phone interview with someone, or especially a video or a personal interview, they're getting a personal call from me to hear that bad news. We got to get comfortable with having those uncomfortable conversations. And I think that's just the right thing to do. And again, that goes back to putting that human touch on the process. Because of course it's easy just to send an email like, oh, no confrontation. I don't have to, answer any questions. And to me, that's, we'll kind of dive into that a little bit. It's kind of a point I bring up here down the way, but I mean, you're spot on. It's like that feeling like you're just like, wow, no feedback, no nothing. I've invested all that time. And this is all I was worth to you, was a standard letter that you send out to everyone. So I can definitely understand the frustration that brings. So thank you for sharing. Okay, so I'm going to jump into how to elevate your interviews. So, phone interviews are a great way, where you kind of kick off that first experience. Being able to talk about the culture, you can verify candidate's experience, get a feel for the candidate. The big thing here is know the job that you're recruiting for. it's really huge that you know the lingo that goes with the job, you know the role, know the company, and know what the team manager, what the deal breakers are. So if the hiring manager says, I've got to have someone with this particular skill, then talk about that, but understand and have those parameters ahead of time, and be prepared to answer questions about the job and the company. It's been really interesting, to hear people as I'm talking through phone interviews, and I get to the end and they're like, do you have any questions? And they say, no, you answered everything along the way. And I think that's a really good sign of I've given them enough information and hitting all those, questions that are top of mind for a lot of people. Talk about the company, talk about the job itself, the hours, expectation, just all those basic things that people want to know about. There's no harm in kind of talking about those and getting those things out of the way. That way they have an opportunity to ask, more meaningful questions and say, wow, they really went the extra mile to ask more questions. And one other thing I do want to touch on here, interviews, before you're even getting to the interview process, is to stop and remember to remove the bias and assumptions as you're combing through resumes. If you don't have an ATS system, if you're doing it manually like I do, don't assume someone doesn't want a role because they look to be overqualified. Job hopping isn't always a red flag. I've personally left roles after a few months after realizing it was not a good fit for me. So don't assume they're a flight risk just because you see some movement there. Take the time to ask some questions. And, kind of going back to the overqualified, people end up in different parts of their life. They change careers, they have different needs at different times. So don't let a good cultural fit get away because you think they won't want a lower title, or, oh, they've been an executive before, they're never going to want to do, this job. I think you could be missing out on some really great candidates by just assuming that they're going to leave, or you don't think you're going to be able to give them enough money, or, fill in the blank. So just want to kind of point that out before we move on. Okay, so I want to talk about a couple tips for a better interviewing experience. So interviews are intimidating. We've all had interviews. So the more you can prepare your candidate, the better. Help them relax and be prepared. And the biggest thing is don't sit them down and just start firing off questions one after the other. It really should be a conversation. Big thing right now is we've had to do a lot of video interviewing with COVID. So that definitely changes things up a little bit. So it's really important that we continue to engage, turn off distractions, maintain eye contact, and still have that body language, showing in the video. So, having questions prepared ahead of time and have a plan. So especially if you have multiple interviewers, break questions into topic areas such as culture, adaptability, leadership, and make sure everyone kind of knows their role and what questions, and kind of be able to hand that off into a seamless process. And big thing here is make sure your hiring managers are trained if they're going to be involved in the hiring process. If they're sitting in on the interviews, conducting interviews with HR or whoever, make sure they understand how to properly interview, are engaged in that entire process. Everyone's got to be bought in. And one big thing before I kind of go through the bullet list here too is, always ask the same core questions of all your candidates. You can certainly ask clarifying questions on work history as needed, but this helps to eliminate some of that bias from your process as well. So just have those same, questions. It can also help in kind of a tiebreaker situation. If you have two candidates, you're kind of like, oh, I don't know, they both did really well. Maybe look at some of the specific questions and see, how they answered those particular questions. So prepare your candidate. Tell them who they're going to be meeting with and how much time to set aside for the interview. Is it going to be a phone call, a video, or is it going to be in person? Are there apps that are needed? We had a lot of candidates I had to send out, okay, have you ever used Teams before? Okay, make sure you go in and, get it downloaded and be prepared. And then provide directions to the company if they're going for in-person, and also contact if they have questions. So kind of gives them a little bit of feeling of, okay, I have everything I need to know. I know who I'm meeting with. I don't know about you guys, but I know if I'm going to go in for an interview and I know who I'm meeting with, I'm probably going to do a little bit of research on those people. So I think that's really helpful to give those candidates that opportunity. And so remember to use conversational style dialogue, leading in with introductions, provide an overview of the process, the hiring process, what to expect, the company, the role itself. And really, really important is to include cultural and behavioral driven questions. That's really going to tell you a lot more about your candidate. For example, tell me about what type of culture you've been most successful in, to see if you're a fast-paced culture and they're kind of like, they want something that's a little bit, not a lot of change going on, not kind of that entrepreneurial feel, then that's probably not going to be, a good cultural fit. Questions like, what are you looking for in your next employer? See if you're aligned on what you can offer and what they're looking for. Behavioral questions such as, tell me about a time when you've made a significant error. Are they able to give you actually an example of where they were able to take accountability, and find a solution to an error that they made? So there's tons of questions. You go online, you can Google them. I mean, there's a ton of them, but I think you get a lot more insight to people and kind of how they process things. And I think you'll get a lot more understanding of what type of person they are and how it fits into the culture that you're trying to build. Big thing is when you're, dig into their responses, when they say something and it kind of triggers something that you want to know more, say that, oh, can you say more or tell me more about that? And let them kind of drive that conversation to see where that leads. Always pause and give ample time for your candidate to process. Dialogue creates dialogue. The silence can be uncomfortable, but if you sit there long enough, they may start talking some more. So just give them a little bit of time just to see if something else might be coming out. And again, remember to smile, engage, and respond, and always be aware of your body language, even on video. Big thing, providing information, timing of next steps. Follow through with your frequent updates. If you interview someone on Monday and you already know you have, a full week of interviews, you may not have another update for them until the following Monday. If that's your timeline, then tell them that's your timeline. It's just, rather than just leaving it open-ended, give them a firm date. That way you can put that date in your tracker, and then you can make sure to follow up with everyone by that date. And I'm a big fan of, slow to hire, quick to fire. That's always been something that was ingrained to me in my early HR career. And it is important to take your time when hiring, but be mindful that if you think they're good, it's likely others will too. So don't sit on candidates that are a good fit that you want to bring on to your company. Don't wait too long because they may be gone. So just be aware. And does anyone have any questions on any of the tips for interviewing or any comments they'd like to share? No? Okay, awesome. And last but not least, after the interview, don't leave your candidates feeling like a lost package. No status available. Nobody likes that. There's, again, we have so many different ways to communicate, even if it's a call to say, hey, I don't have an update for you, or we're a little bit behind in our interview schedule. At least call, let them know. People are honestly shocked when I call them back. It's amazing to me how they've been conditioned to just think it's okay not to be communicated with. And I think it's really refreshing for them to say, wow, you actually called me back. And I've actually had candidates say, wow, you actually called me back. And I think that's really, really kind of sad that we've gotten to that point. So even if it's a no, when you do call them back for that update, they're still very grateful that you actually took that time to give them a call. Okay, here's the big one. Stop ghosting people. For some reason, we've decided that it's okay just to leave people with zero communication after they've applied for a job with you. So this says a lot about your company, and I go back to, you never know who they know. And will you find yourself in their shoes one day? And will they be the decision maker on whether or not you get a job? Not sure they're going to choose you if that's the case. Even if, they missed the cutoff, or you needed to pull the job ad to change the requirement, just tell them that you had to, make some changes and they can go ahead and reapply. But without communication, candidates are not given closure, and that sends a message that they aren't even worth a conversation. So not communicating is a cop-out, along with what Mike mentioned earlier is a generic paper response. That is a no-go in my book. Okay, so after the interview, this is really big. So as soon as you know it's a no from one of the candidates, just tell the candidate. Don't make them sit there through the rest of the process. If it's a hard no for you, just tell them. I mean, that's the big thing. Don't make them wait another 3 weeks while you finish the rest of your interviewing process. It's just not. Set them free. And again, always make a personal call when possible. And this is an absolute must if you have conducted a phone, video, or in-person interview. Huge, huge, huge with me. And I think it goes a long way. And during that time, ask their permission to share your feedback as to why they were not selected to move forward. Be honest and helpful. And Kit, to your previous question, what are things you can and cannot ask or let them know, like as far as their feedback is concerned? I don't think you want to say, oh, well, we don't think you have enough energy to do this job. Really just keep it factual, keep your opinions out of it, but what's actually, factual. And just communicating with all of your applicants. Once a decision has been made, you've got to close the circle. And again, as I mentioned before, get comfortable with having those uncomfortable conversations. And I'm going to go back to our friend Brene Brown again. Clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So you just need to be honest. That's all people are looking for. Put yourself in the candidate's shoes and how it's felt when you didn't hear anything and didn't get any feedback as to why you were not chosen. You don't know what you can get better at for your next interview if they, don't share that information. So when you think about cutting corners, just think about the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Okay, I'm going to just pause there for a moment and see, are there any questions that I can answer for anyone at this point, or comments?
Lindsay, I'd love for you to just help us understand the difference between external recruiters and an internal recruiter, which it sounds like you are. But gosh, when I used to do a lot of career work, we didn't hear much from recruiters. And now if you are looking or you have a good solid LinkedIn profile, wow, you're just getting these calls from these external recruiters. How do they work and who pays them?
Oh, Kit, that's a good question. I'm not sure I can fully answer that for you. Things have certainly changed. I've never been on the outside of being an outside recruiter or headhunter, I guess that maybe you would call them. So a lot of times those companies are hired by larger companies to go out and find their candidates. So then they get kind of a cut. So they go find a person and they come in and you end up hiring them. They basically get a percentage of that candidate's salary, whatever that was. So that's typically my experience with how those would work. And then of course, internal, if you have a hiring team or an HR team, to go out and, put your ad on Indeed and things like that. So that would kind of be the difference. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's been my daughter's experience, particularly when she's been vetted by external recruiters. They may be calling them from Florida or the East Coast or wherever, and they kind of go through an initial phone call, sort of vetting you, and then they seem to then pass you on to different folks within the company. And a lot of those recruiters have been really good about staying in contact. In fact, better than the internal recruiters.
Yeah, yeah, I have heard that. I definitely have heard that. And I think that's a kind of a good way if they have, a pretty high end positions and things like that. A lot of companies will utilize those outside recruiters to perform that ongoing recruitment for the or really hard to fill roles or specialized roles. I think that's where it comes into play because it can be tough to find, find the right people, and so they want experts, particularly in those certain fields, where those outside recruiters can really come in handy.
Yeah. So for the candidate to be real clear about, is this an external recruiter and therefore a different process, or an internal recruiter and a process where it might be a bit more personal about that company. So thank you,
Mhm.
Lindsay. It's interesting. It's a real growth field. It's really
Yeah.
grown over the years.
Yes, yes.
Hi, Lindsay. I have a question about earlier you said to hire for attitude, you can train for skill.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody puts on their resume, let's say that they have Excel as a proficiency, and you bring them in for a pre-employment assessment and ask them to do something in Excel, like a pivot table or something, and they have no idea what a pivot table is, they never heard of it, and they don't just YouTube or Google it to try to figure it out on the fly, would you still hire that person thinking that you can train them, or would you see that as a red flag of, if they don't seek the knowledge, can I train that person?
Yeah, I think that kind of depends on how you frame the question. When you're asking someone, what's your skill level in Excel? Are you beginner, immediate, or advanced? And what are those particular skills that you're looking for? So I think and if you need them to be able to know how to do pivot tables, I think you need to be specific about the requirements that you're asking for. Or I like to use the range. I say, in your Excel skills, rate yourself from a 1 to 10. And if they say 7, and why did you rate yourself that way?
Okay.
And so that could kind of help to determine, because I've had that exact questions actually come up. I had a role that did require those Excel skills, and they'd say, "Oh, well, I feel like I'm a solid 8." Well, because I'm not comfortable with formula. What do you call it? I don't know. I'm not good with Excel either. But you're like, "Oh, I can do pivot tables, but I can't do macros." Like I still need to learn, certain things, but I can do formulas and, reference cells and things like that. So I think it's a matter of how you frame the question. So you may want to think about how you're asking about those Excel skills. If you're just saying, "Hey, do you know Excel?" Sure, I could say I know Excel, but I mean, I don't know that, how in depth. Excel is a pretty expansive program. So I think it's what's important to you and what level do you need them to have.
And more so the question of if you are giving them resources such as a laptop with internet access, like I was saying, if they don't go out and even try to find the answer and wait until the exam ends and have no product for it because they didn't know how to do something, would that be a red flag, or would you still hire for attitude?
No, I'd say that's kind of lacking initiative and being proactive. So I think that's an important factor when you're hiring someone for that particular role. So I think that's something to consider as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, all right. Any other questions or anything else before we're going to kind of run short on time here. Try to get through the rest of these pretty quickly.
Yeah, Lindsay, I have a question. Do you sponsor many of your ads?
Sponsor ads as far as like Indeed?
Yeah, on any platform, on LinkedIn, Indeed.
Yeah, typically, I mean, in order to get visibility right now, because Indeed is so widely used, it's really hard to get your ad in the algorithm appropriately to get visibility if you're not sponsoring the ad. I certainly don't sponsor it to the level that they recommend. They're like, "Oh, based on this job, here we think you should put $2,000." Well, of course you do. You want my $2,000, but I try to be pretty conservative depending on where it is, and where your budget is. So it's really kind of up to the company but you definitely have to sponsor, because if you just leave it in there, or even on LinkedIn, if you can do it for free, and you can, I mean, I have had some candidates, I've had actually really good success on a trial run of 3 days of running it for free, and had really, really good success with a handful of really qualified candidates. But it's not always the case. But I think throwing a little bit of money and just understanding kind of where your money is, and which platform you might get the best candidates from, based on the kind of the level, of where you think those people might be searching from. So yeah, there is some money involved in doing the advertising through those platforms.
Right. Yeah, that definitely answers my question. I was just wondering, like, just generally if you did sponsor them. So
yeah, definitely. Okay, awesome. So we're going to talk a little bit about employer brand. So as I mentioned, your employer brand really starts at the door, and that starts with your recruiting process. So here's a couple of stats that came from hrexecutive.com. That candidates share their negative experiences on social media 34% of the time. And 27% of candidates who have had a negative experience would actively discourage others from applying for a job with that company. And kind of the same thing to your point, Mike, as you mentioned, you're like, oh, that kind of makes me not ever want to apply at that company again, based on your experience. And leads into my point of 41% of applicants with a poor experience ditch brand loyalty. So if it's something we're actually selling, a good or a service, they may not be using your good or service anymore. So it's very, very important that we're setting the foundation with that recruiting process. And what happens when you get it right? Well, I'll tell you this, candidates tell their friends about a positive interview process more than 80% of the time and post on social media. So hello, free advertising. You'll get more quality talent, and a positive experience will, create the option for you to people wanting to come work for you. They're going to be checking your website all the time to see if you have openings because of what they've heard. I've had, people that were not selected for a role at the company, and they've actually referred other people to the company, even though they maybe weren't selected for a particular role. So it does work. And that's why it's just really important that you set that standard, wow them as you come in. Okay, so just real quick, I'm going to kind of blow through this pretty quickly, just for sake of time here. If you're able to, these are all free ways that you can increase your brand awareness about your company. So go on Glassdoor, actually brand your Glassdoor and your Indeed profiles. They do have some paid options, but honestly, you don't need them. And honestly, they're crazy. It was like $20,000. And I'm like, wait, what? So it's kind of overwhelming, but these are all things that you can do for free. You can elaborate on your culture, your core values. You can encourage your team members to leave honest reviews. That's going to help people get to know what people think about your company. And you can take action internally when there are negative reviews, because maybe it is you. There's probably some disgruntled employees, and maybe they, didn't do a great job, but maybe it is you. Just think about that. Create a LinkedIn company page. You can post regularly to exemplify your culture, recognize people, your milestones. This is a great way because, again, people will do research. Good people that are actually looking to go find a job will do research on the company. So they'll go to your website, they'll go to LinkedIn. What are they gonna see? Is it gonna be nothing because there's no page, there's no information? And what kind of information is posted? So that's a great thing is to have your LinkedIn company page up to date. Give them an idea of what it's like to work for you and why they should want to. Add a careers page to your website. If you have a website for your company, you can tell your why, feature employee testimonials, express your values again. So it's all kind of creating this consistent picture, no matter on what platforms that you're going to. Give them an option to apply, even if you don't have an opening, because sometimes you got to get the right people on the bus and find a place for them later. You just never know who's going to send that application to you and say, I never really realized I needed this person. Align the recruiting experience to your company values. You know, if you're touting people first on your website and that poster that you put in the break room, then you better walk the talk. And that should be wholeheartedly built into your recruiting process. Tell potential candidates why you joined the company, vouch for them if they're getting it right. I really love when candidates ask questions at the end of an interview and they say, well, why did you choose to work here? And I think that's a really great opportunity to share that story and why you do work there. And I think that's a sign of a great candidate because they're asking really thoughtful questions and they really want to know about the culture and why other people want to work at the company. So that's your opportunity right there to sell your company and get new people on board. So demonstrate to candidates that you value potential and current employees. Showing them respect through this process says a lot. Again, be honest and be timely. That's part of your employer brand. No matter, like, there's all the marketing pieces, but your employer brand still starts with how people feel with their interactions every time they interact with you. And so, you know, make sure your team members are your advocates. You know, are they posting on social media about their job, how much they love their job, their coworkers? You know, again, consistency is key. And so if you're able to start telling that story through all the different platforms, you're making headway. So just a couple of examples. These are just from my company, LeisureQuip, Glassdoor, where we've shared our mission, our core values. We're starting to build reviews. We're a fairly new company, so this is all still getting built out for us, but we're, you know, when reviews are left, make sure you're taking accountability. And, you know, if you don't take action on feedback, then you're losing trust. And whether that be a current employee or former employee, you know, people will see this and how you've responded and maybe taken accountability for something you could have done better. So maybe it's possible that these were employees that weren't self-aware and weren't accountable for their actions. Sure, there are some candidates, again, that will just be mad, but at the same time, maybe you can get some insight if you really start digging into some of the feedback that's on there. So I think it's really important that you get in here, brand your Glassdoor account, because that is a big site where people are going. And I don't know if Glassdoor and Indeed have recently joined forces, so they're now kind of one and the same, which is kind of interesting. So when you go to Glassdoor, when you have a job opening, you will actually see jobs connected through Indeed as well. So they are partnered together to become quite a big force in the hiring arena. This one here, this is just Indeed. Again, we've branded our Indeed page. Again, why do you want to join our team? Here's our core values. Again, here's what we're all about. We've done the same thing with the website. And then, you know, currently hiring, you can still go in and be able to apply for jobs right from the website. I think that's a great way to get people to know your product. And again, it's creating that consistency. And we talked about LinkedIn. So here's some things from our LinkedIn page. You know, we've welcomed new team members. Those milestones I talked about, you know, it's really important that you're sharing those important moments in your company, because then people understand where they are being valued and go, hey, that looks like a pretty cool place to work. You know, Employee Appreciation Day, just little things that really tell your story about your brand and about your culture and why people would want to come work for you. So it doesn't have to take, you know, it's not expensive. These are all, again, free things that you can do other than your time investment. But I think your return on your investment of time is well worth it if you get this part right. Okay. So I'm going to jump into one of my favorite topics, and that's getting real about feedback. You know, there's great data out there, but you have to ask for it. And so it's really important that if you want to get better about your recruiting process, if you want to get better about anything in your company, your performance, just anything at all, you need to ask for feedback, and you can't be afraid of the results. And if you get the results, be prepared to do something about it, because if you don't, again, you're losing that trust with your employees. If you ask for their feedback and then you don't like it because it makes you uncomfortable, then you're really not making any progress, and you're probably going to start losing people. Okay, so a couple different things I want to point out for utilizing surveys. And again, free. These are both free options for you to be able to utilize. Cervicate, so it's cervicate.com. You can go in, you can create a survey to send to all your candidates after a recruitment is closed. And oh, by the way, you can use that candidate tracker or your ATS to go grab those emails that you've organized your candidates with and send those surveys out and use that data to understand where your process is falling short with candidates. Be thoughtful in your questions. What do you want to know? And again, take action on that feedback that you're getting. Secondly, SurveyMonkey. It is free for up to 9 questions, a survey that you can create to send to new hire after 90 days and learn how you did after you got your candidate on board. Did you sell them on something that you aren't delivering on? Are they getting the tools and support they need to do the job? These are kind of some of the questions that we've built to be able to make sure that we've onboarded and fulfilled our end of the bargain that we sold them on this job and our company. So I'm just going to just briefly a couple just screenshots here of what Cervicate, this is kind of what Cervicate looks like. And it is has built-in logic to it. So depending on what their answers are, you can change the logic to which question that they would go to next. But again, it's just some really good information. What could we have done differently? If you were not presented with an offer, would you consider applying with us again? That says a lot right there. Your overall experience, and would you recommend us to a friend or family member? That's huge. That's huge. So ask those good questions, and again, be willing to take the negative and do something about it. SurveyMonkey, just real quick, this is just kind of a 90-day employee satisfaction survey we put together to kind of gauge how we were doing with the onboarding process. And again, this deck will be available after the presentation today, so you can always go back and reference this if you like. Just trying to make sure I get through as much as possible. We're running short on time. And then SurveyMonkey is really cool because it actually will then give you kind of all your results. So everything's kind of tallied up for you and kind of see where your company's rating. And then a couple of them, we've actually built in responses. So they can freeform response, share any comments that can help us improve the process or your experience. And I love this one because this tells me that we're doing something really, really well. And that makes me excited because this is obviously an employee that's excited to be part of our team. So I love that. And that's something that you can stand out from the crowd, and people do notice when you're exceeding their expectations. Okay, I'm going to blaze through this real quick. It's really about the onboarding experience. So now that you've got your new hire, the onboarding experience is just as much a part of your brand as recruiting is. Couple of stats, just want to talk about real quick. 82% of new hires that are retained when a great onboarding plan is in place. And the percentage of employees who had a formal onboarding process and hit their performance goals, 77%. That's pretty huge. And then percentage of new employees that are more likely to stay with the company for 3 years if they experience great onboarding. I think that's a pretty good rate that we'd all like to see and not have that turnover. And what happens if we aren't doing it right? Well, time is of the essence. So percentage of new hires that leave a job for a new opportunity within the first 45 days on the job. So if we didn't do something right and they're not feeling engaged because we didn't set them up for success, they're out the door in 45 days and you're starting this process all over again. Same thing, employees that leave within 6 months because there was no follow through, there was no plan, there was no feedback. Those are all things to consider. And 18% is around the average salary and the cost to replace an employee. So it gets pretty expensive. So I think we can eliminate some of that turnover, and having to onboard these people all over again if we just get it right out of the gate. So again, just real quick, tips for kind of a great onboarding experience. Have a plan. If you want people to be successful, you have to be intentional. Have the hiring manager make a welcome call after the offer is accepted. Send a company-wide announcement telling everyone about the new hire. Get them excited. Make sure their workspace is prepared. They have equipment for their first day. Make sure they have a schedule, job description. I mean, these are all just really great things to have. Maybe a welcome gift. Welcome gifts are really great, especially if you can personalize them. You don't have to spend a lot to make it worthwhile for them. It's going to be very welcoming to come in and say, look at my desk. My desk is all set up. They were actually prepared for me. They want me to be here and they want me to be successful. So that's really, really important. Again, this deck will be available afterwards, so you can reference this again. And just wanted to share kind of a little picture. So this is our actual conference room right before I do new hire orientation. So, just a little something extra. And you can make a great welcome gift for under $40 or less. Get creative with it. Go the extra mile, get personal where you can. The dollar store has a lot of great ideas for packaging. All of these things. It doesn't have to be expensive. Just make it thoughtful. And, make sure every person feels welcome as they're coming onto your team. So biggest takeaway for today, technology should amplify, not replace the human touch. If you're in a position that's responsible for your company's recruiting, know that you're setting the stage on whether or not candidates decide to work for you. So this is your company's first impression and impacts your employer brand and the quality of candidates that you can expect moving forward. To candidates, how you do anything is how you do everything. So make sure you're letting candidates know what they can expect when they come to work for you. If they're getting those warm and fuzzies right out of the gate when they have a phone interview with you and they're like excited to say, wow, this is the kind of place I want to be. And they know if they were treated well at that stage in the process, they're probably going to be treated well once they come on board. Make sure you seek out support from the top down. All of your leadership team should be supportive of your process and understand sometimes it may take longer to find the right people, but that's okay, because if you're sticking to, your cultural values and what you want on part of your team, then it's worth it. If you're doing it right, the talent will seek you out, and simple yet meaningful actions do matter. So when you think that personal phone call to tell someone, hey, sorry, I've got bad news this time around, you're not going to be able to move forward in the process, that's still really meaningful, and that's the human thing to do for those candidates. Any questions that I can answer for anyone?
I was impressed with the welcome gift. I wondered, when can I come work with you?
Oh, that is like one of my favorite parts, to see their faces when, when they walk in and they're like, oh, that's for me. It's just it's a really great, really great thing that they're able to, just feel that extra step of warmth, So I think that I really like that part of seeing their face.
Yeah, that's the first thing I want. Is like, give me a t-shirt or a sweatshirt. I want to show my school pride, like right away.
So just a couple of recommended readings here. If you're responsible for recruiting or just trying to really build that culture, some really great books that I've had the opportunity to read. And so just some ideas for you there, and as well as a few helpful links. Again, this deck will be available so you guys can actually click on the links. Onboarding statistics, how to improve the experience, communication, just some really great things to keep in mind. And again, if you have any questions at all, my contact information is here. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, I'd be happy to. But again, email me or call me with questions or ideas or anything. I'd be happy to connect with you.